Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. With over 30 years of professional experience serving Central Oregon, Fred Johnson can help guide you through the Central Oregon real estate landscape. Call in at 541-388-1110. Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson is brought to you in part by the Central Oregon Association of Realtors, Evergreen Home Loans, Abijay Automated Control Systems, and Duke Warner Realty. The phone number again is 541-388-1110. Now, Talk Real Estate, only on FM News 100.1 and News Talk 1110 KBND.
Hello, Central Oregon. Hello, Central Oregon, and welcome to Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Fred Johnson. I'm happy to have you with us today. Today, it's another beautiful summer day here in town, and you can tell by the number of folks that are in town that we live in a very blessed place, and we're absolutely probably some of the most blessed people in the Northwest, but gauging by the number of out-of-area license plates that we're seeing all over town. Hopefully you're out there, you're enjoying and having a great time this summer. Looks like we're winding down for summer. I'm already starting to see the advertisements for school shopping, and kids are getting ready for school. Thank you for being with us today. We're real hopeful that I'm real hopeful that you call in, that you visit with me. We do not have an interview to do today. Hopefully, many of you, we kind of took a little deviation last week, and we had Nate Peterson come in and tell us a little history about Central Oregon, about Klondike Kate, and how she found her way to Bend, and how she was really a character in our area. Hopefully you found that enjoyable. It wasn't all real estate related, but every now and again, part of our community and the number of issues that come to make Bend what Bend really is really affect our livability and our story that we tell. So again, I would invite, I'm certain that you heard on the lead-in, the phone number here at the station is 541-388-1110. There's so many issues happening in Bend, and I'm certain that some of you would like to maybe talk through some of the issues in Bend, or maybe how you might get your property ready for sale, or some of the things that you may want to look into. Last week at the beginning of the show, I sort of stepped through some of the details and basically the feedback, both not only on air, but also through email through the course of the week. Apparently a number of you enjoyed the fact that I didn't just sit here and read number after number, and actually gave sort of an overall effect of some of the impact. A couple of things that are really interesting that are happening here in Bend right now. Obviously, affordable housing. Affordable housing is getting an awful lot of attention, and how that is going to take shape and what that looks like is really quite interesting. In fact, today was another one of those days where it was actually the headline item on today's Bend Bulletin that there's some progress being made. And I guess the only thing that I have to say after reading that article is, one, it's great, it's warmly received, it's something that's well overdue, but really how we get there and who negotiates on our behalf from the city's perspective to that end, we should take a part in that. We should pay attention to what's going on. It was basically with the urban growth boundary, and the urban growth boundary being a little bit slow to happen. It's not because the process is so laborious. It is not something that can react relatively quickly to the supply and demand that's happening in Bend. So what we're starting to see, obviously, is more and more of those pressures for density. In other words, getting our homes closer together, having more homes per acre than we had previously, and also some vertical input, whether we can raise the height limit on some of the apartments, such as the apartments that are proposed to be built. I believe it's a 208 unit project that's right next to Pilot Butte. And there's some people that have been protesting about the building of this apartment. I don't know if they're solely about the location of the apartment and its proximity to the park, or if their primary objective is the raising the height limit, where they're proposing going to 45 feet as opposed to 30 feet, which is what's the current ceiling for that style of construction here in town. But each of these issues individually will all come together and sort of lay the blueprint for what Bend is going to look like moving forward. And such as this article today in the paper, and because I'm a real estate broker, I'm to look at things both from the positive side as well as the negative side. And sometimes I've witnessed in Bend that, some of our founding fathers or our city council members or county commissioners or whomever they may be, though very, very well intentioned, find themselves in a negotiation position where maybe they don't have a lot of previous experience to be negotiating those items. And sort of what stood out to me in this article was that there was the promise that there was a local developer that, because of the higher density, would be able to build some affordable housing, but before building that affordable housing, because that portion of it would be nonprofit, he proposed that he did a for-profit project first, along with asking for a $400,000 loan from the city that would then make all of that possible on the backside. And of course, I think one of the earliest things that each and every one of us learn when dealing with, contractors, subcontractors, and all of that is you try not to pay before the task is completed. So the way the article read, it appeared that really there was a great opportunity to make a little bit of profit and get the loan and do some stuff up front, but there was really no assurance on the backside that the affordable housing component would happen, and if it didn't happen, what that would look like. So, as citizens in our community, I guess what I would offer is just to keep the eye on the ball and to see how these projects are starting to come into effect and what their short-term and the long-term effect is, because it seems that we talk a little bit too much to talking points and don't really talk about the project in full. But on a positive note, we're really seeing some things here in the Bend market that are great. We're seeing some good balance. I heard this week for the first time from a couple of property managers that we're actually seeing a little bit of softening in the rental market, where when the vacancy goes higher, when the vacancy rate goes a little bit higher, that means that there's more potential rental properties available for people that are looking to move or relocate or move their housing somehow or another into another rental property. We've been hovering right around 1%, and I guess we're seeing that move a little bit closer to 2 and 3% now, which is good news. And as everyone may be aware, if you've listened to the show in weeks past, there's a number of different apartment complexes, one that I just mentioned, that are on the horizon or in various sundry stages of their development and the permit process. So nearly 1,000 units are proposed to come online, which will certainly have some effect on the availability of rental, both in the affordable housing section, which is always tied to a percentage of the gross median household income. But there were also some other economic indicators that I received today that are really good, talking about the total number of housing units sold, the job creation, the number of building permits, and all of this. I think the greatest fear that each and every one of us have is the possibility of the bubble bursting or that, and it really straight across the board. We're not seeing that the number of housing units being sold is nowhere near as brisk. In the height there in 2005, it was 607 units were sold during the second quarter, and here in Bend, 459 were sold during that time. So as you can see, that lags behind. The one thing that I did notice that was interesting was that there was a considerable drop from the high point in our solid waste here in Deschutes County. But there's lowering unemployment claims, non-farm payroll employment is coming up to near the same. The number of building permits, though it is increasing, is nowhere near. At the heyday there, we were pulling 412 permits during that corridor, and here in the second quarter of 2015, there was only 137 permits pulled. But that only 137, both in Bend and in Redmond, we're seeing a number of permits pulled, which means that for the home buyer that's out there looking at potentially purchasing a home, that they're having increased selection both of existing homes as well as new homes in the Bend market. So we're going to break here in a few minutes. One, I'd like to encourage anyone, if you have topics, I've got a bunch of paper here about a lot of the different key issues that are happening in Bend, whether you want to talk about the college location or the UGB or any of a number of different issues, please call in. Again, our number here at the station is 541-388-1110. My name is Fred Johnson. You're listening to Talk Radio, Talk Real Estate here on KBND. And I look forward to visiting with you after the break. Thank you so much. Welcome back. You're listening to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson here on KBND and FM News 100. Excuse me. Before we broke, we were talking a little bit about the current market here in Bend and how there's really some upward ticks and some real stability in the market, which I just wanted to go into just a little bit further and share that with you. I think that, when we look at our market in Bend and we look at the number of different opportunities that we have and sort of how our economy is diversifying a little bit, I think that it's really an exciting time. As in all growing communities, there's a number of issues that are hotly contested, and it seems that, where an awful lot of us will sit at home and be kind of casual, there's a vocal few that get right out and, really push their opinion forward. And, we just need to be mindful of how a number of these different things affect our overall community and our overall stability moving forward. But one of the main things that came about, and I know that I shared it a little bit last week, is that we saw in the month of July that the total number of sales had softened just a little bit. I believe that it had moved from nearly 300 to about 250 here in Bend proper for those 2 months, which is really reflective of the market activity a month and or two ahead of the closing dates, because it takes a little while for the financing to come together, the home inspection and all of that. It takes really, in some cases, yes, you do get the all cash buyer, no contingencies, close within a week, but really the vast majority of the business and activity is in that 30 to 45 day timeline. So when we look at, that's one of the issues with, and I'm hopeful to have an appraiser come in and maybe share some of the appraisal process, because sometimes it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because, appraisers are always, I don't want to steal his thunder, but appraisers are always looking in the rearview mirror. They're looking for deals that closed sometime within the last 90 days. So they're looking at properties that were maybe negotiated, or contracts that were actually negotiated as much as 5 months ago or 6 months ago. And if we're in an area where there's some upward pressure on pricing, then the valuation from the appraiser seems to lag a little bit behind today's current known or anticipated values. And where that really kind of comes into some problems is when you have someone that may be trying to renegotiate for a lower interest rate, trying to lower their house payment, and they know that the house is just like theirs in their neighborhood just sold last week for an elevated price, but then when their appraisal comes out, it may not be at that elevated price. That's just sort of endemic of the process of appraisal, in that to come up with a comparable value, it needs to be reflective of something that was negotiated sometime in the past, and it's really hard for them to speculate future values. But when we look at our market and we see that there is new inventory coming in, there's a little bit fewer transactions, we have a little bit more vacancy factor in our rental market, all in all, to the potential purchaser or someone that's moving, that's all good news. That means that there's more choices. It doesn't really compensate for the fact that rental rates have been moving up at a faster rate than employment and payroll has been moving up. But we're seeing the total number of sales moving down, both in the Redmond market and in the Bend market. We're seeing still the building permits are fairly brisk, and they increased a little bit over the month prior. In the city of Bend, the building permits were 84 permits were pulled. In the city of Redmond, 25 permits were sold. So basically what that means is in the next 4 to 6 months, those are new construction, new homes that will be coming online. And then, one of the things, we had an opening of a new, the John L. Scott office relocated here in the Mill Quarter district down on Bond, real near. For those of you that may know where Strictly Organic Coffee is, they're right there between the Strictly Organic and the Oregon CrossFit. But they moved into a new office, and when that happened, Lennox Scott came into town, who is an industry expert. He travels around a fair amount, and came into Bend and offered some of his insights into the Bend market from the outside. And I think that that's really important. Sometimes when we're in Bend, and a lot of us remember when, old mill houses on the Westside used to sell for $15,000. Well, obviously, that market has changed pretty dramatically, and to sort of have a clear perspective from someone from outside of the area that may be in the industry, offer some insights to what they see in our community. You know, it may not be 100%, but it's certainly enlightening and, something to share with us. And his observations, some of which were very, very right on according to the statistics that I've been sharing with you in recent weeks. And that's that in the price point, below $500,000, we've got about a 3-month supply. We're seeing that about 79% of our market happens actually not only below 500, but really happens at 350 and under. And so what we're starting to see is that, that's where an awful lot of the new construction is in that same price point. But one of the other contributing factors that he shared that I thought was really quite interesting, for years as a real estate broker, we've always gone under the assumption that the average turnaround time, the average buy-sell cycle for someone is somewhere in that 4 to 6 years. And that's always sort of been, sort of the common benchmark that people are going to move every 4 to 6 years and something different is going to happen in their life. And for whatever reason, what we're seeing now is that we're having a smaller amount of the inventory turning around in existing homes because people are selling their homes on the average of every 10 years rather than every 6 years. So what that means is that the new home construction is going to be a proportionately higher, particularly in an area like Bend that is expanding and growing. The new home construction is going to be a larger segment of that market than reselling existing homes. And what that does for the seller that's trying to sell an existing home is that because there's so much newer inventory, it allows that a buyer has more choice, and it sort of, if you will, keeps the price point in check. It doesn't allow either the new construction to go absolutely wild or the existing structures to go really wild because there's no other choices for a buyer that, there's a number of real estate transactions. We always like to think that, it's all good times, young couples going out and buying a new house. But sometimes, people are buying homes because they're being relocated. They're trying to get established in a neighborhood before the school season starts. There's a number of other contributing factors that people pursue housing that they may not be able to sit back and wait and cherry pick the absolute optimum time for them in either price or interest points and that. And it's just really good that our market is so healthy and diverse. The other thing too that Mr. Scott mentioned was that the interest rates, which I found was pretty interesting, and I know that I have voiced this because all of the experts throughout the country have been saying that we're going to see our interest rates pushing up, and we could anticipate them moving up a percentage point to maybe as much as 2 over the next couple of years. And his input on that was that after every recession that interest rates have remained historically low to get more traction, to get things moving back up in the market. So he sort of downplayed the prospect that interest rates are moving up. But as a good real estate broker and genuinely from an honest place in my heart, I would encourage anyone, that is, if your family's getting larger, you need to move into a larger home, you're renting and you really don't like paying the rent at such a high rate to help somebody else buy their home, and you'd like to consider buying a home, to get out, talk to a real estate professional, talk to a mortgage broker, see what options you have out there. You may be pleasantly surprised, and this may be a very good time to consider getting into the real estate market, getting into home ownership, stabilizing your monthly payment. Don't live under the fear that someone's going to give you an eviction notice, and get into the community and explore home ownership. Particularly with some of these smaller homes that are coming online too. There's a number of options for everybody. After we come back from the break, we've got a couple of other things to talk about here today. There you go. So I guess we're going to talk when we get back. Again, this is Fred Johnson. I'm here with Talk Real Estate, and our phone number is 541-388-1110. Come on back, and we'll talk to you after the break. Thank you so much. Hello out there, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Fred Johnson. Happy to be here today. And our phone number here at the station, the property line as I like to call it, is 541-388-1110. If you'd like to call in, like to discuss any of the issues that we're about to discuss, please feel free to do that. I'd welcome it, and would like to hear your opinions. We've got a couple of them here, which I feel kind of like I'm maybe kicking a hornet's nest a little bit, but I'm gonna give it a go. And the next two issues that I'm going to talk about is the City of Bend and marijuana regulations and what that might look like going forward. And the other one here is that the county approved this new agreement with OSU Cascades for the adjacent property. I know that both of those issues are, there's some strong opinions out there. And, maybe if you'd like to share some of those opinions or you'd like to ask some questions, please feel free to call in at the station here, which is 541-388-1110. This marijuana issue is really quite funny. And excuse me, I don't know if you find it all funny, but the squabbling seems to be over the tax revenue and the tax money generated in some of the cities, such as Crook County, have decided that they wanted to opt out. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to have any recreational outlets in their community whatsoever. And by opting out, that meant that they were not in line to be able to receive some of the taxation. And as I've been going through life and, obviously answering questions from my children when they were talking about what is vice and what isn't. And it seems that it really kind of comes down to the bottom line. And I don't mean to be overly judgmental, but it seems that it comes down to, taxation, the ability to tax, the ability to be able to generate revenue off of it. And then whether it's alcohol or gambling or now marijuana, it's okay as long as there's some tax money generated and revenue generated for it. Then how that money's, then the fun begins, because then you get a bunch of these people that derive their financial benefits from tax revenue. Well, then suddenly everybody wants to squabble over it. And so the issues that are up are not only with the city council, are not only what those recreational outlets would look like, but maybe what their hours of operation would be, what the signage would look like, its nearness, its proximity to either schools or parks. The city agreed to form a committee to establish some rules regulating, these recreational outlets and what that might look like. And, it's really quite interesting how they, if you're a business person and you realize that, our community is open for business, but then when they try to implement a bunch of rules like this, it's like, well, we're open for business for all businesses, but these vice businesses, and then we really kind of want to regulate them and keep them different than other businesses that are in our community. But at this point in time, ultimately what's happening is whether the Oregon Liquor Control Commission is going to continue to oversee the distribution of recreational marijuana, and whether or not their taxes, I believe their taxes start out at 20%, and then it's supposed to move down to 17% of the total sales. Well, I don't know really how it sells and what the price point would be in the retail outlets, but if it's, a couple of $100 an ounce, it would seem to me that we're talking about a fair amount of tax revenue being generated. And, I don't know if once, the OLCC starts to get their hands on some of that revenue, if they're going to be real willing to pass that on to somebody else. But that's a different deal at the state level. But then here in our town, and this is one of those places where there may be some hearings, there may be the ability for members of the community to meet with this committee or at least give testimony at this committee if they hold any open houses, because a couple of things that may be really important and maybe some people will be fairly passionate about, and that's if a dispensary should be able to open right across the street from the high school. I think it's pretty easy to say that I don't think there's a lot of people that would be enthusiastic about that. Whether they should be spread out all over town or whether they should be sort of clustered together so there'd be kind of, marijuana row or something like that. It's just really interesting how we've gone through this process and there's been a vote and the people have spoken through the vote, but then now how we're going to police it, how we're going to do it, and then most importantly, where the money goes, where the tax money goes that comes out of it, I'd like to raise my hand to see some of that maybe go into affordable housing. Might not be a bad place for it to go in our town. So anyway, if someone wants to call in, they're more than welcome to. I guess I'm gonna have to resort to doing one of my all-time plays, and that's Red Carpet Car Wash is gracious enough to give us a car wash on occasion to be able to share with our listeners for calling in. And when I offer a little incentive, it doesn't seem like it's too long for someone to call in to get the car wash. Things get a little dirty here in Central Oregon. And then I'm going to move on, and I'm going to talk about the OSU Cascades. OSU Cascades, many of you that tuned into our local news saw that there were a couple of different entities that wanted to speak up about, one is the site location, and they're really focused on that site location, and the other is just the whole deal. They would just as soon not see a four-year university in our community whatsoever. And I guess as we go through that, I guess what I'll offer, I'm going to kind of offer a little bit of my personal opinion here. I think that going forward, one, as we've shared, a couple of weeks ago when we had James Gentis in, and we were talking about a number of the different startups in the communities and how great it is to have not only housing but also have potential employees to back some of these high-tech industries and diversify our economy here in Bend. I think that that's absolutely marvelous, and personally, I kind of like the prospect of having a four-year university here so that our children don't have to travel, and we do have an intellectual pool, a research environment, whatever it may be, so that there's more potential employment and more potential opportunity in our community. But when we look forward, instead of really being focused on one issue, maybe, in my opinion, the appropriate question is an overall transportation plan for the city of Bend that integrates well with ODOT and the highway network. It allows commerce to pass through our city, but it seems that we're working very hard at working on individual issues and don't have an overall master blueprint of how the city is going to grow and how traffic is going to circulate throughout the city. The Westside, there was Mount Washington Drive was built, which would have been great, but unfortunately they put a median strip through the whole thing. So, in the event, we live near a national forest that also has volcanoes. There's a number of things that could happen on the west bank of the river that could create a catastrophe of some nature, and to be able to have the emergency response to be able to get supplies and manpower in there to deal with the issue, as well as be able to evacuate that issue, is limited to a limited number of river crossings. And so when we talk about the school and the school's location, which granted is on that west bank of the river, it's on the side that is limited by the river crossings, to focus on the transportation and how people and how traffic is going to circulate to that area, maybe some things that would affect the livability of our town, not only in the near future, but also in the future as we move further forward. There was another proposal that was put up this last week about beautifying the Galveston corridor and how dense that should be and how they should press that as a traffic calming deal. Well, that too is one of the river crossings. So to totally occlude that river crossing, when that there's going to be some future development further to the west that may need, in an emergency situation, may need that river crossing. Those are in Fred Johnson's opinion, those are the issues that really could use some brain power, some intellectual power to be able to come forward and really design what that transportation network looks like. And then when we go to choose slight selections for potential employers or whatever it may be in our not too distant future, then we would have the flexibility of knowing what the blueprint is for the traffic flow, instead of just trying to accommodate each use on an individual basis in an individual location, and then hope that the patchwork of individual plans all come together and make something that's real workable and real livable. So, excuse me for getting on my box there a little bit, but if traffic is truly the issue and traffic is truly the concern of people that are vocal and picketing and standing on the street, then let's address traffic. the school is kind of a symptom. It's not the disease. Again, you're listening to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm your host, Fred Johnson. You can contact me here at the station, 541-388-1110. And I'll look forward to visiting with you after the Hello, Central Oregon. Welcome back. You're at Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm your host. And I was pretty amazed. That last segment there, I talked about marijuana, offered a car wash, and didn't get a call in. So this quarter, I'm going to talk about the OSU Cascades. There was a new little interesting tidbit in the news. Not only did we have street side protests this last week, but also the city entered into, or excuse me, the county entered into an agreement with OSU Cascades for an option on some of the adjacent land. Now, just so that I can offer a little. Though the term option wasn't used here, this is an opportunity for me to offer a little education in this Talk Real Estate program. So an option is where you fix the price and terms for a piece of property, and once you establish that value, then you have an option to be able to purchase that land for whatever the term or the period of time may be. In this particular case, it's a 2-year term. Now, it wasn't disclosed what the price was, but basically it puts OSU Cascades in control of the sale of that land at that price for the next 2 years. So there's actually a couple of options. Once again, didn't come out in the article, but I think that it's just noteworthy given the situation, and certainly given some of the emotion that's happening around this development, is that they could potentially, there's 2 parcels there. There's the 76-acre parcel, which was an old pumice mine, and then there's the 46-acre parcel that was the old demolition landfill. And basically what that was organic materials, branches, trees, rocks, that sort of thing was put in there. It wasn't really a garbage landfill. It was more organic matter that was placed in there. And many of you that it may have lived around here for some time may have remembered that there was actually a subterranean fire that went on there one time that came, and there was a young man that was hurt in our neighborhood. But both of these parcels of land are incorporated in the urban growth boundary. They are in the city limits. They're in a high demand area. So to think that they're not going to be developed, and both of them are going to take a fair amount of work and energy to get them ready for development. I think the estimated cost was $7 million or some ridiculous number to bring it up to grade to have it be developed. But I think that when we're looking and going forward, whether that development is going to be an expansion of the forthcoming college campus or done some other way, the reality is that the Oregon State Cascades could, now that they have an option on the property, they've already agreed to a price, they could go sell it to somebody else, and another development would come into that land. So there's nothing that says that they should present their comprehensive plan or that they should present their development plan for that land, because in actuality they don't own the land. So none of us could go to our neighbor's house and put their neighbor's acreage and put together a design plan for how we want to develop it and submit it to the city or county without actually owning that piece of land. So that's one of the things where some people in the community have been really vocal about the fact that the inevitability of the OSU Cascades in their initial 10-acre parcel, and there was the adjacent 76 and 46 acres. Well, when you add all that together, that's 132 acres of campus, parking, housing, any number of things that could potentially go in there on the west side. But because the college doesn't know if they're going to buy the land or exercise their option is the real estate term that's used. There's no way for them to even approach the issue, expense, and all of that it would take to do a comprehensive plan of designing a 132-acre campus site for that property. So, when we look at it, once again, before the break, I talked a little bit about traffic plan, and personally, I think that is the issue. You know, I don't think that there's really been a community anywhere in the West that you can say that property values really took a bad downturn as a result of a college coming in, particularly if it was a research college that came into an area. It generally has positive influence on values and also has some really kind of intangible impact on the business community and the diversity of the local economy. So if it looks like moving forward that's something that's probably going to happen there, instead of resisting and not wanting change, to maybe take a look and to encourage our voted officials to really address the transportation issue. You know, and the issues that come with transportation are not only the transportation of being able to circulate traffic in and out of an area, but the key one is emergency response vehicles. I mean, if you have a fire or if someone has a stroke or something like that, how long does it take for the ambulance or the fire truck to get there? And that's every bit as important as having, you know, bicycle lanes and street trees and all of that. It's sort of there's a balancing act that happens in there, which I applaud the city on the expansion of the Galveston Street, where they didn't go with the most restrictive, figuring that they did need to accommodate some of that traffic flow going through. It may not have been, you know, optimum from someone that may live right there on Galveston Street that wanted to have the traffic calmed all the way, but that's part of living in a community. That's what's good for one isn't necessarily good for everybody else. So, you know, basically what we have in this agreement with the city here, and they have not entered into, as I'm to understand, they have not entered into an agreement as of yet for the 46-acre Puma site. But when you bring all of that together, so far they have planned for 1,900 students once the 10-acre campus is complete. They anticipate that there would be room for, you know, additional growth, additional housing, additional parking, you know, a number of those things to do that. But it's as I said, it would take an awful lot to clean that property up and make it available. You know, I think I might have a car wash to give away here. Let me see if, hello, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, Sean here.
Sean, how are you today? Thanks so much for calling in.
Well, you bet. I'm sorry we're about out of time, but my question would be, why on earth take up what could be a densely populated neighborhood, which wouldn't involve near the number of people, near the amount of traffic? Why not take it out east on the desert and make it blossom like a rose with a beautiful campus that wouldn't involve near the excavation, near the expense, and could be something that would really set up the east side and not create a traffic nightmare that already exists on the west side.
Uh-huh.
Why haven't they discussed that? Why you could do a beautiful campus, you know, out 20 somewhere.
Well, and there's, you know, fortunately, and you know, maybe in next week's show we'll be able to get into that, to where actually it's kind of nice that some of the commissioners and city council members from the different cities in the Central Oregon area are trying to work collaboratively to see if maybe we can do some extension of services outside of the urban growth boundary. But right now, you know, the way that it's written with LCDC and at the state level, we can't really go out on Highway 20 because the urban growth boundary ends right there just on the other side of the Safeway store. So it doesn't allow for any dense development or anything out in Deschutes County, out in that area. And we were
like a campus wouldn't qualify.
Well, that's what they're going to explore now, is that there's some, you know, like outside of Prineville right now, where they have those data centers that they're starting to build. They're starting to explore the possibility of being able to locate this sort of development out in the county and not necessarily be in the city. And John, you know, you're right. We are running out of time today. I appreciate you calling. If you could, send me a text at fred@dukewarner.com. Give me a way to contact you, and I'll make sure that we get you a car wash so that Red Carpet Car Wash can get your car nice and clean for you. And
appreciate it.
If you'd like, I'd be more than glad to carry on this discussion a little bit further at that email address if you want to send it to me. That's Fred@DukeWarner.com, and I could share a little bit of information of what's been happening as this